Well, talking about anxiety, first dates and things like that, that can give us anxiety. So I think it's very pertinent and appropriate to speak about anxiety these days because we are all a little bit anxious. And certainly having gone through COVID and all the different restrictions and all the attachments that we lost while we were under the COVID restrictions, then we found a vaccine, and somehow now some of us dealing with long-term effects and things like that, maybe still worried, but the world has come a little bit, calm a little bit down. Now with climate change, now we can't calm that easily. Even now, knowing that there are a few storms being formed in the Atlantic, near Africa, and before we used to have a predictable path for those storms, and now we know that those storms can make a left or make a right or go to any other place. And so certainly climate change is creating a very anxious situation, and very particularly for teenagers, who are the ones that are going to have to go through the real problems that we have left for them. So the world is in this moment very anxious. And so I thought, as usually I do, what can yoga say about anxiety? How can we help ourselves and help the world go from anxiety being an enemy, a problem, something we even fear, the very fact of anxiety we can fear, into an ally? And when I say an ally, a lot of people say, but what are you talking about? Anxiety, an ally? And yes, anxiety, the fear of being unable or not sufficiently equipped or prepared to face an impending fact, this is the definition of anxiety, is a very positive feeling. If it wasn't for anxiety, we human beings wouldn't be here, because anxiety helps us prepare. As an image, I can share that anxiety is like a yellow light in a street light. It asks us to be cautious. And it indicates that danger is somehow possible. Not necessarily probable, but yes, possible. And if anxiety was to stay there, it would not be a problem. But the problem is that, as many other feelings, when instead of being informants of who we are, and this is what our great feelings are for, these immense hearts that we have, and these feelings that are inside our hearts, are here to inform us of possible danger, are here also to inform us of who we are and how we relate to others. What kind of things make us comfortable and what kind of things make us uncomfortable? What kind of circumstances are acceptable to us and what kind are unacceptable? And also, what kind of things are tolerable or intolerable to us? And imagine how important it is for us to be prepared for life, knowing what is it that we feel, how is it that we feel, both when we are by ourselves, but mostly when we are with others and when we are interacting with reality, with the world. And unfortunately, those feelings, and this is something that Freud said years ago, that we humans tend to pleasure and shy away from displeasure. And of course, those feelings that are pleasant, we love. And we want to repeat and do again and be with the same people that provoke them and repeat the things that gave us those feelings. But the feelings that are unpleasant and indicate us of what is uncomfortable, unacceptable, or intolerable, we tend to not like. And that's when we defend from our feelings, we criticize them, we judge them, we repress them, we kill them, we transform them into something else. And in doing so, we lose the precious information that the feelings have for us. And we don't get rid of them, because you know that we don't do. We just kick the ball forward. So to find the same ball 2 or 3 steps forward, when we walk in our lives. So obviously doing any of those things with the feeling is not the right idea. The right idea is to process them, to be able to transform them in some way, both inside and outside of us, so we can benefit from them. And I usually share, and I want to share this process with you, 4 basic steps for processing feelings, because our talk today is about precisely one of those steps. And the first step in processing feelings is to name them. And with that, I mean, give the feeling the appropriate name. Why I say this? Because, for example, it is usual that sometimes men, or the masculine aspect of us, doesn't like very much sadness, because it's not very masculine, it's not, it doesn't look very good. And so usually women tend to transform sadness into anger, because anger is a masculine feeling. It makes us look very macho, very fierce, and so we like it more. So at the time of processing, and let's say I am talking to a man or a woman who has a very strong male aspect, or a non-binary person who happens to have some strong male aspect as well, and we are processing the feeling. Well, first of all, we need to name whether we're doing anger or sadness. And something similar happens in the opposite case. For the feminine, anger is not very well seen. And so it's common that women would turn anger into sadness. And so when we are processing, what are we processing? Anger or sadness? So first is naming. Step number 2 is identifying, which relates to finding clues inside of us that we are feeling that feeling. And the clues that we're looking for, we could follow the wonderful categorization presented by Patanjali of actions, thoughts, and speech. So actions relate to the body. How can we know? For example, I know that when I'm getting angry, I sweat behind my neck. And if it's not hot, and if nothing happened and I start sweating behind my neck, I know I can identify that I'm getting angry. My speech gets very choppy, and I tend to go over words. And my thought is always feisty. I'm always fighting. Even I'm going back to old fights that I already resolved, and yet I'm revisiting those fights and fighting in my head with all sorts of characters. So I know that I'm getting angry in those 3 forms, either in my actions, in my thoughts, or in my speech. And we also can identify our feelings in the onset of the feeling, when I'm starting to get angry, in the transit through it, when I'm in the midst of a rage attack, or right in the offset of a feeling, after I have had a rage attack or a big bout of anger. That's identifying. That is very positive, because if we want to apply any kind of different technique, any kind of repair to or process or management or regulation of the feeling I'm feeling, I need to identify it first. Step number 3 is precisely managing and regulating. Managing has to do with the type of feeling, with the nature of the feeling. So many times we yoga teachers are trying to help someone that is angry, and we tell them, relax and exhale twice the counts that you are inhaling. And for an angry person, that's impossible. An angry person is and we're asking them to relax. The same applies with a person who is sad, and we tell them, well, get out of bed, take a shower, call some friends, put on some lipstick, and go to a fun movie. A person who's sad can't even get out of bed. So what are we talking about when we suggest these things? So in terms of managing a feeling, we have to show up with the right toolkit. And regulation, the other part of step number 3, is to bring the intensity of the feeling to a workable level. Because a feeling that is riding, that is really high, we can't really regulate. So step number 3 is managing and regulating. And step number 4, the last one, is staying functional. So we do all this so the feeling doesn't deprive us from the possibility of fulfilling our functions in life, being a father, a mother, a teacher, a brother, an employee, whatever we are. So those are the 4 steps for processing feeling: naming, identifying, managing and regulating, and staying functional. Steps number 1, 2, and 4 are always the same for all feelings. But interestingly enough, step number 3 is unique for each feeling. There are not 2 feelings that we manage or regulate in the same way. And why I am telling you all this? Because this is what I want to talk about today. Step number 3 for managing and regulating anxiety. And I'm going to share with you some ideas that belong to the world of psychology and some others that belong to the world of yoga. And this is the beautiful mix. Psychology and yoga mix in a beautiful way. I think that yoga mixes well with anything. But in this case, because I'm a psychologist, this is why I appreciate that union. So the normal symptoms of anxiety are a rapid form of thoughts, so racing thoughts, and a sense of danger, that something bad is going to happen, doom. There's sweating, there's trembling sometimes, there's a highlighted heartbeat, accelerated heartbeat, also accelerated form of respiration, hyperventilation, and these are some of the normal symptoms of grief. Of anxiety. Now, how anxiety is positive, even when it presents some of those symptoms? Because as any other yellow light, it helps us prepare. And so anxiety is one of the great animal signs or signals of alarm. And in terms of any animal, it signals the possibility of danger or sexual deprivation. In social animals, it relates to the possible abandonment or getting lost. For many animals, it's very important for safety to stay together, to stay in a pack. And so when they get lost and they can't see, they feel anxious, and this helps them return to the pack. In humans, it also indicates a possibility of judgment, how we are being seen, and how we are being either accepted or rejected in our pack, in our herd, in our group. As also, particularly for humans, anxiety has the important action of indicating to us when we need, for example, to repair relationships. When relationships have been damaged and they are important to us, and anxiety helps us repair those relationships. Anxiety also help us be not so self-critical and be a little bit more self-compassionate or compassionate with ourselves. So as you can see, anxiety has a number of positive feelings. And there are certain normal types of anxiety that we can consider. And for example, there is temperamental anxiety. And some of us just are born with a little bit more anxiety than others. It could also be related to illness. For example, a phobia. People who have cancer become very anxious. Grief certainly can cause a lot of anxiety. And it could also be, on the normal side, situational. When I'm about to take an exam, when I have a first date, when I have to speak in public. And it could also be circumstantial, when even though you have been preparing and you're perfectly prepared, all of a sudden there's no internet in the ashram, and it's very hot, and one is sweating, and the glasses break, and the computer doesn't work. Sounds familiar? So anxiety can come in many different ways. But what happens when, instead of taking anxiety as a yellow light, we take it as a red light, as a sign of real danger? We take it as pure fear, not the fear of not being prepared, but real fear. Well, imagine what would happen if we hear at home the smoke alarm sound and we run away with our important documents. Well, maybe it was just a cake that we were baking and it was smoking, and because we left the apartment, it catches on fire and our apartment burns. So, taking anxiety as a red light that indicates real danger, probable danger, and not a yellow light that indicates possible danger, that becomes a problem. And when anxiety is a problem, it has certain characteristics which are very similar to the normal symptoms of anxiety, only that on steroids, but also very rapid thoughts that bypass the reality testing. They don't consider whether what I'm thinking is real or not. We just get really fearful. It's loop thought process as well. We tend to think and rethink the same thing over and over again, picking up on very small details about the story that are not really important, and yet we think about them and think about them and think about them, getting nowhere. Also, there is a lot of vigilance or hypervigilance. In general, anxious people are more controlling, are more vigilant, because they're trying to get the situations around them under their control or inside of them as well. But hypervigilance tends to be full of judgment, tends to lose trust on other people, and always be considered that we are being ourselves judged, which is self-consciousness. These are some of the symptoms of problematic anxiety. And then problematic anxiety, when it is, instead of being the fear of a possibility, is real fear, everything changes. Fear starts in the body, is instinctual, and it indicates it is fairly accurate in informing us about what's dangerous. But anxiety is in the mind, not in the body. Fear cannot be regulated by us so well. What we have to do is go to safety. Anxiety is self-regulated, and we can increase it crazily just by letting it be. Because whenever anxious thoughts appear and we don't contest them, we don't react appropriately to them, they increase. And they become more often, they become more frequent, stronger, and all these other symptoms appear. So, how to turn anxiety from this problematic one into the ally, into the friend, into the informant that can tell us something good, and how to be more prepared? Well, from a psychological standpoint, we can say that perhaps the first one is to differentiate between fear and anxiety by asking ourselves, is my life in danger or not? Is this a life or death situation or not? Most of the times we'll see that the anxious thoughts are not of that kind. If we miss the exam, if we don't do well in the talk, if we don't have a good time in the first date, it's not going to be a problem. We're not going to die. So differentiating whether it is a real life or death situation or not is the first step, as well as thinking whether our integrity is at risk or not. Because sometimes if our integrity is at risk, even from a moral or from a psychological standpoint, it could really be a dangerous situation. But if it's not, then first of all, we can differentiate them and understand, define that we are really feeling anxiety and not real fear. The second possible step, because anxiety is a yellow light, is to present the anxious thoughts with some contingency plans. So what if I forget what I was going to say in the talk? Okay, then I can either have a little bit of a paper to remember, or if I remember that I did not say, if I realize that I didn't say everything, I can bring it up at the end and excuse myself. And if I didn't, I can try to get everybody's email and inform them of that important thing that I didn't do. Okay, so I have 3 things that I can do in the anxious thought. I go about my life, 10 minutes later, I have to give the talk. What am I going to do if I don't remember? Okay, I can have the paper, I can excuse myself, or I can send an email and keep going. 2 minutes later, once again. And this is important because what we are doing is we are following the very good knowledge of neuroplasticity. I think I shared with you the other day that according to neuroplasticity, neurons that fire together, wire together. And what that means is that when we rehearse a new behavior, a new behavior, that behavior needs to be fired. So our neurons need to fire up in order to implement that behavior. That firing stays wired forever. And if we go over that behavior once again, then we deepen our ability to react in that way. This is one of the beautiful coincident points between yoga that considers that without abhyasa, without practice, nothing happens, and neuroplasticity that says if you really want to change your life and you have rehearsed a new behavior, practice it yet again. So you're going to deepen that circuit, and then other connections in your neuronal reality will fall into that canyon, let's say, that repeating the action will form, the law of attraction. So, given the anxiety, a different route, neurological route, is what we're talking about. So when the anxiety shows up, we offer the anxiety, the anxious thought, 3 contingency plans at least, and we repeat and repeat and repeat the 3 plans until we are able to calm down. This would be from a psychological standpoint. Now, yoga, once again, has a lot to say. Not only because it offers this possibility of practice, but because also, as we know, there are a lot of great things to do to calm down the breath, to diminish the speed of the thoughts by, for example, meditating or chanting something, and chanting it instead of what we just did, going from low to fast, doing the opposite, starting fast and then slowing and slowing and slowing down. That could be another way. We know that there are certain parts of the body that relate to anxiety more. We've been talking about Pawan Muktasana. We've been talking about the shoulders and how to work with them. And the shoulders, from a psychological standpoint, relate to power. If you think about it, all our action figures, Batman and Superwoman and all the other ones have huge shoulders where to have their capes. We don't have a lot of heroes that have little shoulders in the back. And so shoulders relate to power, the power to bear the weight of the world in them. And so the shoulders, what happens in anxiety, they go up and they try to come up our power to our thinking process, trying to get more thoughts and more thoughts to solve the problem. And so working with the shoulders, doing any of the wonderful shoulder exercises would work as well. Relaxation, yoga nidra, that would work as well. And many other asanas or breathing exercises, pranayama. But there was one aspect of yoga that relates to neuroplasticity and that I would like to bring up that I think it's very positive. You may remember that Patanjali reminded us that when dealing with negative thoughts, we shall transition to the other side of the mansion, said he, praktipaksha bhavana, to the other side. And in the West and in many places, we have translated this as positive thinking. It's not that simple. The mind is pretty stupid, but not that stupid as to believe that if you hate someone, you just say, I love her, and it's going to work. Our mind is a little bit more elaborate than that. And so what Patanjali was talking about was something that also we know partially thanks to neuroplasticity, which is that when we push our awareness to the extreme of a continuum, and we return to the proprioception, the awareness of where we're at, we are never at the same place. So if we, for example, think we are cold and we imagine that we are freezing and we just taken a shower and we are naked in Alaska, and now we imagine that we are in the ashram here and it's hot as it was today, or even worse, and the water is as hot as the air, and now we go back to, okay, how cold are you now? We never return to the same place. Our proprioception, our awareness of ourselves, always changes when we push that same awareness to the extreme of a continuum. And this is one of the possible interpretations of Praktipaksha Bhavana. And so, what would you say is in the continuum of where anxiety is, or fear is in one of the sides, because fear is, right, what the feeling we're talking about, anxiety is a form of fear. What is on the other side of fear? Trust. Yes, sir. Trust is what's on the other side of fear. And so yoga is a wonderful source that can be trusted. Number one, because in this world where they're all trying to tell us, you know, like I said the other day, to buy some things and promise wonderful things if we buy it, and if we buy the update, even better. And not always it works. But the beauty of yoga is that no matter how many times we go back to it, it's true. It's the same true. The same things that we've been hearing, the same the same teachings that we have been receiving for thousands of years are as valid and practical and effective today as they were 5,000 years ago. What a beautiful body of knowledge. So a good place to go to generate trust, per se. But on the other hand, yoga's emphasis in us being ourselves, in us developing our own power, in us believing in our own resourcefulness, and awakening all these things until finally we shall arrive to self-realization, it's a wonderful way to counteract this fear. And even if we don't go to this meta-meaning of yoga, and we just take it as the simplicity of using it for an anxious thought, and thinking, what if I fail in my talk and I don't remember? Okay, the worst thing that can happen, they'll never invite me back to the ashram. Okay, the best thing that can happen is that I am very humble and I disclose my mistake and everybody loves me and I'm invited back for years. So, how bad do I feel now if I don't remember something? And just that very exercise may help us. And I know that there's a lot more that we can apply, but this is what I wanted to share with you today. I don't want to go over the time today again. I want to make it short. And so, resuming, the idea is that anxiety, the fear of not being capable or able to face an impending fact, is actually a positive building feeling that can help us, as a yellow light would, be prepared, be better prepared for life, gain more self-confidence, have more compassion with ourselves, and help us have a good life, a better life. When anxiety is turned into a red light, that's when we have problems, and either from a psychological standpoint of offering some contingency plans to the anxious thought, or practicing some asanas or pranayama to calm the overreactive body and mind, or address the meta meaning of yoga and help us transition from a place of fear, uncertainty, and disbelief into a place of trust, and the trust, the ultimate trust that either will be okay, or even if we are not, is going to be in our highest good. One way or the other. There will be a lesson that we will learn, and we'll make it. Ultimately, we'll make it one way or the other. So, thank you. Thank you very much. Do you have any question? Because we have a couple of minutes. Do you have any question? Huh. I never know what to do with your lack of questions. What? Wait, have a microphone. So thank you.
I actually have just one.
Yes?
So the way you handle the emotions, like, would you say you can like all kind of emotions or just fear? You know, the same method.
What do you mean?
Like for example, if you're angry and you don't know how to handle your anger, so would it be the same method?
No.
Right.
Remember, the same processing feelings, yes. First, you have to name anger. Second, you have to identify it. And you have to stay functional even though anger is there. But what is anger good for? For what you cannot accept or what you cannot tolerate. Anger is wonderful for boundaries. But anger, as step number 3, managing and regulating, has a different set of things, different set of asanas, and different set as well of ways of regulating it and manage it. For management, in terms of anger, there are 2 steps. The first one is to target the anger, to write a document that says what and who angers you. And you shall not be rational. Because, for example, you're going to get married outdoors and it rains the day of your wedding. You're angry at the weather. And if you rationalize it, it's like, how can you be angry at the weather? It's just a matter of pressure, humidity. Yes, you can be angry at the weather. So don't rationalize, just write what is that angers you. And then the second step is to express the anger to the target. And really to say to the target, no, you shouldn't yell at me, versus it angers me when you shout at me, when you yell at me. I'm not to be yelled at. It angers me when you yell at me. With determination and with certainty, you can express also your anger even to the more angry of the targets.
Thank you.
Yes. And like that, there is number 3 for each one of the feelings, all of them. But they are wonderful. They are there for us to learn from them. And we have a lot of them. Any other question? What?
I would love to hear your thoughts on sadness as well.
On sadness?
Yeah.
Why not? Yes, thank you. So sadness, again, always have to name it, always have to identify it. But in terms of step 3, management and regulation, in terms of regulation, anger is a very dysphoric feeling, is a downer. So you have to do your best to try to bring your energetic level up. Whether it is right nostril breathing for 5 minutes or doing Pawan Muktasana faster than you would in this low and nice form. In any way and possible way, try to bring your energy as much as you can up. But in terms of management, sadness, number 1, the first step is to not do what avoids sadness. Because that's what we all want to do. No, not sad. And so we do a lot of things to not be sad, and that's how we get more sad. Because sad is very incisive, very insistent. And then the idea is to sit with sadness, to let it be and befriend it. But befriend it as you would befriend a person who talks too much about herself. And you know she's a good friend, but the day you need to download some material about you, you don't call that friend, because she's not going to hear you. She's going to talk about her. So she's a good friend, not to be your roommate, just a good friend. To see her some days yes, some days no, and the day you can hear, and the day you can do some fun things. And in that way, that's the idea with sadness, to not try to avoid it, because sadness is what elicits repair. If it wasn't for sadness, we would not repair. When we hurt someone, when we have done something that we didn't want to do, and we contact, that sadness that we feel, that's what elicits us calling this person or asking for pardon or doing something that would repair. So sadness has a lot of very positive aspects. We shall not avoid it. And we shall sit with it, know that it's going to go, because all things are impermanent. So for those who think that they will be sad forever, no, they won't. Because nothing is forever. And I'm talking about normal sadness. If we're talking about depression, which is a condition, then that's something different. You may need some medication, you may need some treatment. But I'm talking about normal, the normal sadness that we all feel. Is that helpful? Okay. Any other question? One more. Yes.
Going back to anxiety and the
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Not very much. I don't...
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Going back to anxiety and the plans, contingency plans, what if there is a situation where none of the plans are really good ones, or, you know, that they're just in their plans, but they may still have some bad outcomes as a result of them?
Yes, like for example, inevitable pain.
Well, I have a particular situation. I mean, there are some situations in life when no choice is a good one.
Acceptance is next. So when the idea is how to interact with these different things, and we can work with anxiety, but perhaps like you're saying, you know, if there is a storm coming and it's a hurricane, and we can be all the prepared we want and we can, but it's a tornado. It's not going to work. Then we have to do our best and accept. Just accept. And if in the case of a hurricane, it's different, but sometimes in the case of inevitable things, perhaps go to plan B and trust that this situation that is unavoidable for you in this moment, at some point, is going to have a silver lining, is going to have a reason why it happened, something that you can learn from, and then by applying some sort of emotional coping mechanism where you can extract the worst out, the good out of the bad, or the positive out of the negative, then at some point you may process that reality, that circumstance, and try to find what teachings can you find there. And in the ultimate case, like for example happens with cancer, when it doesn't matter how well prepared you are going to die. Well then, if you have been close to someone dying, one thing is to die in remorse, in regret, in desperation, with repentment, with unfinished business. And another thing is to die accepting, having finished your business, in peace. It is still death, but it's a very different type of death. So this is why I refer to the fact that in this idea of applying Pratipakshabhavana, okay, if there is nothing good that we can avoid, at least we can trust that where we are going is where we need to go, and that there is a good way to get in there, even if it is painful, even if it is bad.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.